to talk with you a little bit about this concept of rise. When I first talked with Jerry, we were like, oh, things in a bakery, they rise, and people who run small businesses, they have to rise every morning. And so I really was excited to get to talk about this particular topic because as I began to brainstorm about it, it came out that it really means a lot to me to talk on this. So to start, this is a little bit about me to give you some context. My beautiful family, my husband is here supporting me too, and he works in the neighborhood, and he worked on Magnolia when there was nothing on Magnolia, in PR actually, in a design firm. So he's been around this area in this neighborhood for a long time. But that's my family. We really believe that we run a family business, even if I'm kind of more the face or the operations of the daily. It's a family decision and a family involvement on all of that. I have 2 daughters. One is a high school senior, so we're doing all those fun senior things that are both really exciting and also really sad to a mom all the time. And then I have an 8th grader as well, and she is precocious and probably like 13 going on, 22. And we've lived here in Fort Worth for, like a little over 20 years. And my husband grew up here too, so we are longtime Fort Worth people. I graduated from Austin College up in Sherman, Texas, with an economics and Spanish double major. And then I went to work in human resources at Texas Instruments from a connection there. And part of the reason why, this is kind of like the side note on the word rise, because it's not really what I'm going to talk about, but it's still applicable, is when you look at the diversity of what I've done in my career. I have done nonprofit consulting, which I was talking about my friend Tim earlier, and I was like, I was doing that and I had zero idea about what nonprofits do and how they work, and I wrote a manual for boards because I did some research, and I do have a master's in organization development and change management, and I thought, well, it's applicable, we'll just make it work. I was a professional scrapbooker for a little while. People literally paid me to scrapbook. And then I moved into some other things like PR and content creation before, that's back when there was mommy blogs and Facebook was just becoming a thing, and we were like, how do we figure out this thing called Facebook? We used lots of just beginning tools as those things were coming out. I wrote some for a family camp and the HEB Foundation for their publications, and then I was also a photographer and designer. And the reason why I wanted to include this, not just to give you context for who I am, but to also say, you could look at this and say, you are super random in the things that you've tried to do. I see things that you've tried and they didn't last very long. I was not good at the professional scrapbooking, so I stopped doing that. There are things that I did, here's 4 things that I'm doing all at one time, and let's just sort of see what sticks and pursue that. And I think sometimes when we think about this concept of rising, we're told in society that you are generally trying to go on a linear path from A to B to C to D. And sometimes you get derailed, but that's either an accident or a mistake, and somehow that part is wrong, and you course correct. But when I look at what I have done in the past, everything I've done, I've learned something that has brought me to where I am and who I am now. And so I don't believe that it should have been a linear path. It looks really scattershot, and I think that I still could step back and look at my career and say I still was on this trajectory of rising, even though it didn't look like a linear rise with maybe some mistakes in there. It was all on purpose. I'm reminded of some friends and I were having this conversation about when you face the same kind of issue in your personal life over and over, and you're thinking, am I ever going to get beyond this one thing? And we talked about it sort of like when you're climbing a mountain, the view, what you might be seeing physically, is the same because you're on the same side of the mountain. But when you look back and you realize I'm actually looking at it from a different perspective now than I used to, it doesn't feel so wearisome that you're kind of looking at the same view because you can see the progress that you've made because you're at a higher view from it. And so I sort of feel like that's what this is. It looks random and it looks like there's successes and failures, and there were, but but none of it means that I wasn't on a rising trajectory. And so I talked with a lot of people right before about just kind of being at this crossroads in your life of figuring out what to do and it looks really different, or embarking on something that doesn't seem like the traditional thing that you're supposed to do as a family or in your career. And I just wanted to be encouraging to say, like, you're still on a path to rising, because all of this is in support of who you're going to be. And so I'm really grateful for everything from the, failed scrapbooking to where we currently are, which is owning Leaves Book and Tea Shop and Stir Crazy Baked Goods. I'm really sorry that we couldn't meet at Stir Crazy today. We're just not quite large enough to have all of you, especially seated. I was like, you can stand around. But this is where we are. So we began Leaves in a little bit before 2018 doing some pop-ups. We had the vision for it, and the space wasn't quite ready, but we were committed to the space. We opened our brick and mortar in 2018. And we operated there until just the very end of last year. About 2 years ago, we also purchased Stir Crazy Baked Goods over on Magnolia Avenue. And then this past Christmas timeframe, we merged the two into the one location on Magnolia Avenue. So our vision at Leaves when we started was to be a place where you could pause from the hectic pace of life so that you could be present with yourself, with the person that you're with, potentially with your work. It was really important to us to combat this idea that busyness is productivity, because all of the research says you're more creative, you're more productive, you're more emotionally healthy, you're more physically healthy when you take pauses every once in a while. And yet society tells us something different, right? Like, if you're not busy, then you're lazy or you're procrastinating, and all those things have these negative connotation. But sometimes your brain just needs that opportunity to take a breath and process all the loads of information that we receive constantly. So we began Leaves with that vision. If you want to understand more about our heart and soul in that, I recommend the book Starts With Why by Simon Sinek. Or if you don't like to read, then look for his TED Talk, and you can watch the 12-minute video of that. But for us, that was influential because our belief is this is what we offer as a product, as a service to our community, is this place to pause. We happen to sell tea and books and now baked goods because we believe all those products do support our vision. But I'm a firm believer that we can change our products at any time because our vision is what drives what we do in the community. And that's actually even why it made sense for us to buy the bakery, not just because tea and baked goods sound good together, but we believe that steeping tea causes you to pause and reflect. I still love coffee, but I drink coffee for the pick me up and run, and I would even say sometimes I chug coffee. With tea, I don't know that I've ever said I chugged a glass of tea, because you sip tea, you savor tea, you inhale the tea. Books are the same for us. It takes requires a commitment to sit down and read something that's more than a Facebook headline or a tweet and inform an opinion. And so books support that. And then we also feel like the baked goods support that because we think it's important to pause for a moment to mark a milestone. That milestone might be happy, like an anniversary or a birthday or a wedding, or it also might be a really hard time, like you're going through cancer treatment and you need a bright spot in your day. Or a loved one has passed and you're taking a treat to someone to encourage them. And so we think all of those things are important. We tend to gloss over those things a lot. And so it's important to mark those milestones as well. So that's why it made sense for us to combine the two together. As far as physically moving our space, I've had a lot of people say oh, is it so much better now? Are you excited that you're all in one space? Yes, absolutely. It's nice to have one overhead and one set of staff and be in one location that I don't have to split my time. Part of the reason for our merging was definitely financial. Things are hard out there. You all probably know in the places that you work, every day in our small business community, I hear about people who are struggling or closing. So some of it was financial necessity, and some of it was just my own sanity of trying to run two separate places with two separate staff, and just thinking I am every day trying to survive, and there's zero thriving here. So How can we make that better? So part of that combination is for that, and I would say that that part's successful. It's fun. I loved our space beforehand in the bakery. It was designed by the previous owner, and so once we brought our leaves aesthetic and some of our plants and some of our bookshelves and those sorts of things, I realized how much it feels more like home and more like me now, so that part is fun as well. But we've combined together, and here we are. And so I could also say, like, that's another way that you rise, right? You face an obstacle, and you see it, and you go, what are we going to do? And you problem solve, and then you get up and rise again. When I first was talking with Jerry about this, and I thought, there's a million different ways that we can go. What am I going to do? Because I could ramble and talk for hours with you about this. I went to my trusty mind map. I don't know if anybody else uses mind maps for anything, but it helps me to brainstorm and dump it all out. And so I just drew a mind map and thought, gosh, there's a lot of things you could talk about. There's obstacles like, hey, how about you start a business and 18 months later go through a global pandemic? That's super fun. Yeah. How do you rise above those circumstances you can't control? You know, there's the economy, there's political unrest. There's things like the city of Fort Worth is sometimes really fun to work with when you're trying to run a small business. So those obstacles that you encounter. Yeah, I know. It's not, I didn't look at Ann. Ann is great. She's always been super supportive. We missed Ann. It is not her fault. Talk to the planning department at City of Fort Worth. There are things like failures of things that didn't work, hires that did not work out. We had, in the very beginning of Leaves, we had a machine that was super expensive that made the tea in a really cool way, and it sort of like broke, and then the manufacturer went out of business, and you're like, that was a failure. I'm glad we spent all that money. And so there's things like that, and when I looked at this like over and over again, what I realized is, for me, this term of rise speaks to resilience. What does it mean to be resilient, and how do you foster that character trait in yourself? Because as a small business owner and entrepreneur, even as a creative, as you're putting yourself out there all the time in your work, how do you become resilient? It's something that we talk about in our home and wanting to teach our girls before they leave our house. How do you be resilient? Because the world is beautiful and wonderful, and it's also super hard at times. And so we don't want to be the ones constantly clearing the path for our girls. We want to teach them how are you resilient in the face of adversity. And as I thought about that in my little mind map, I thought some of it is personal fortitude, right? Like you put your shoes back on, you get back up again, you with willpower, like make it through the next day. And some of it is perspective within that fortitude. I am a believer in the spaghetti test. Of you throw it against the wall and you see if it sticks, and that tells you if the spaghetti's done. And if you noticed back on my original little career map, there was no retail, there was no service industry experience there. There really wasn't brick and mortar experience unless you count TI, which is a huge, international business. Yet I opened 2 of those with zero experience in that. And so I think in some ways that was of benefit to me, because I didn't know what people normally do, so I just tried out things. And so some of my perspective in that's allowed me to view things not as failures, but as learning experiences, truly, was I just see it as throw it up against a wall. If it stuck, cool, we'll just continue with that. If it didn't, figure out why it didn't, and if we care that it didn't, and we move on. So I think some of that resilience comes from that perspective. Some of it comes from just that sheer willpower. But they've done studies that says willpower is a finite resource, right? Like you can't continue to just muster up willpower to infinity. And that's why I think this self-care, self-help industry has grown so much, because we've realized we've tapped out our personal fortitude. And you have to do something to replenish that. The problem is, as great as an idea as that is, and as supportive as I am, and I try to do that, it's still hard to find the time and the energy and the money to do all those things which fill your bucket back up. Which leads me to what I really wanted to talk to you today after that really long introduction, which is I truly believe that we are wired to be in community, and that community is what helps us to build that resilience. it is my community that helps me to get back up in the morning when I'm like weary or tired or just beat down or feel like, what is the point of running this little shop here in this little neighborhood, except for I have friends and community that both cheer me on as well as give me really great advice on what to do and how to handle things. And so I, a long time ago, heard this quote, "A rising tide lifts all boats." It's generally attributed to JFK. He talked about it in terms of economy. We're not talking about that right now because you can agree or not agree with what he said about that. But for me, this concept of a rising tide lifts all boat is what's good for the community is good for me. If I can help my community out, it's not at my sacrifice. It benefits me as well. When we were about to open the bookstore, another bookstore opened right around the corner, and people were like, "Oh, are you okay with that? They're opening another bookstore." And I was like, yes, absolutely. Because if we can create a corner where there's bookstores and book lovers go, then someone who knows about that bookstore who didn't know about me but passes it on the way, and they come to me because of that, that benefits all of us. I refer people constantly to our friends over at Monkey and Dog Books that's on 7th Street. She carries things that we don't carry, and she's extremely kind, and they have a shop dog who's really cute and people need to go pet. And so it's really exciting to me to think about this concept even in the terms of business of like I'm a competitive person. Ask my husband. If we play games, I'm competitive. But when it comes to business, I feel like community over competition is really what I try to live by, because it is more important to me that we're successful as a community and then we're all successful than if we're constantly holding tight to things because it's mine and I don't want you to do it. I just think that ends up being ultimately bad for my business as well as the good of the community. So a rising tide lifts all boats. If you saw on my mind map, that's where I was like, rising tide. I really love that part. A long time ago, when I was doing a lot of writing, I went to a writers' conference, and I met this group of experienced authors, and they were talking about the fact that young authors struggled with sharing what they were working on to get help on it because they were so afraid that someone was going to steal their ideas. And so as this writers group got together and were talking about this, they said, okay, let's dispel this myth. What if we use these same 5 elements? And this writers group was huge, and I think they ended up with 22 submissions. The elements are, the very first line is the exact same for everyone. The wind was picking up. It had to involve a case of mistaken identity, a pursuit at a noted landmark, an unusual form of transportation, and the last line also had to be the same. So that's exactly what she did. And they said, what if we all took that and we wrote? And they did, and they wrote, everyone's nodding, you know where this goes, right? 22 very different stories, even though these big elements were exactly the same. And I remember thinking that, and that's in the back of my mind shaped my thinking throughout my entire career of no one is ever going to do something exactly the same as me because they're not me. And so if I have an idea for a bookstore, no one is ever going to make Leaves Book and Tea Shop because no one else is me. Even with the bakeries, you've seen that transformation. It started as a different owner, and I'm doing it differently because I'm still running with a lot of the same staff, the same recipes, the same general concept of it's a bakery where we bake the same products, but it's really different now because I run it differently. And so for me, in thinking about a rising tide lifts all boats, the importance of community, that I'm hardwired to do that, and this idea that I don't have to hold so tightly to things for fear that someone else is going to steal something from me, has opened me up to be authentic in community, to be able to say, you want to know about running a tea and bookshop and bakery? I will tell you everything that you want to ask. When I first opened, like I said, I had no experience in any of those things, and I met with a ton of people to just say, where do you even order books from? How does that work? Is it a distributor? Is it Amazon? Like, what do you do? And I found that there were some people who do hold tightly to their businesses, but I found a lot of people who were like, I will answer any question that you had. And as a result, I was able to start in a successful way. I still learned a lot of things, but that gave me a leg up to be able to do what I do, which is still really different from what they do. I met with a lot of bookstores over in Dallas, and they were so friendly and helpful that I just thought, like, yes, this makes us all better. If I can run a successful bookstore in Fort Worth, it actually helps them in Dallas, because the DFW area is not known for having great literary societies and community. And so we all help each other that way. It's the same reason why now anyone who's wanting to open a business, if they come to me, I'm like, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, because it was helpful to me, and if I can be helpful to you as well, then it benefits everyone. Because I don't want to live in a place where you have a bunch of failed small businesses where small businesses can't thrive. And so it's not worth it to me to just hold on to my special secrets, which aren't that special, in order to somehow benefit me, but not to benefit someone else. So this has framed our we have a family value of community. We have our business value as community. In our home, that's also part of why we opened Leaves. We were constantly having people over. We did what we called Sunday lunch, where we cooked like a real lunch, not order pizza. And we were just able to invite people over to connect. And we were doing that at such a pace with such a lot of people that we're like, how do we bring this outside of our home too, to allow more people to connect? And that was part of the emphasis for Leaves as we started. And so it is ingrained into what we do and how we do it. So what does this look like? This is a group of coffee gals who we lovingly have called ourselves the Coffee Mafia, because we probably drank too much wine one night and thought that was funny. But these are other coffee shop owners and founders that are all women here in Fort Worth. Catherine, for example, is Cherry Coffee, who is now roasting their own coffee, and it's incredible if you didn't try this. Catherine is 1 block away from us, and do I feel threatened by Catherine? Absolutely not, because what Catherine does at Cherry is very different than what we do at Leaves. And she is the spreadsheet queen, and so we talk a lot about financials and how do you manage that logistically. And Mia owns Black Coffee, which is over on the east side. Carrie did run Wildcraft Coffee, and before that Arcadia Coffee, and she's transitioned. Janice ran Roots Coffee, and she has transitioned. And then Sarah runs Love Local, which has a place down on Hewlin by I-20, and then now up in North Richland Hills with a pinch of salt. We get together at the Holly usually, so if you want to find us, that's where we are. Yes, we did drink all those bottles of wine. And we talk about everything from, clothes you wear and yoga studios you're going to deep business topics of where are you struggling. And there are even times where on our text thread we're like, does anyone have 8-ounce cups? Because I'm out of 8-ounce cups. And that is my community. And again, I feel like people are, we've had some articles and podcasts about us, I think because they're amazed that like you're all coffee owners and yet you still get together and hang out. And we're like, yes, of course, because we need each other. We uniquely understand what it's like to run a coffee house type environment, and sometimes it can be really lonely in what you do, because people don't, as well-intentioned as your friends are, if they aren't doing what you're doing, it's hard for them sometimes to connect with that. And these gals know exactly what it's like with staffing and resourcing and all of those things. And so it's great that we get together. We probably get together once every month, 6 weeks, and drink a lot of wine, and sometimes we end up at Catherine's house baking chocolate chip cookies, and we talk about all the things. It also looks like this. On the right-hand side was the South Main Village Business Owners Group. Jennifer was a part of that with me in the very beginning. When I first opened Leaves, I thought, I can't do this by myself. I need other small business owners in this area to be able to say, like, are you seeing this trend? Are you seeing these crimes? Are you, dealing with these specific customers that come in? And so we met they still meet on a monthly basis to talk about those sorts of things. What's going on in your business? How are you doing? How can we support one another? We came up with several promotional ideas that we went in together to promote the area, because we felt like if we can promote, here are all these things that you can do and experience in this area, that helps all of us. Because I can't always get someone to come just to my location. But if I can say, here's a place you can eat, a place you can go to a bar, a place you can shop, then people come to the area and they discover more about you. So we ran that. On this other side is the GSD girls. That is Carolyn Phillips, who ran Alchemy Pops for a while, and Robbie Werner, who is a longtime friend and who we bought the bakery from. But we would meet, so we would carve out, GSD stands for Get Stuff Done. And we would commit to one another once a month that we would carve out a day that was our GSD day. And we would individually do that, and we would get our things done. And then we would have lunch later on that month to be able to say to each other, what did you do on your GSD day? And that was super encouraging, one, because there was accountability, and two, because the things that these two ladies carved out as important to work on, to spend a whole day working on, sometimes I would go, oh, I need to do that too. And then we'd be able to share resources and talk through that. And then about once a year, we would go and stay 1 or 2 nights, sometimes locally, in a bed and breakfast or in a hotel. And that was kind of our like weekend, or usually it wasn't a weekend because we all had families and that was difficult, but like a Monday and Tuesday. And we would say, this is your vision and strategy planning for the year, or whatever it is that you've been putting off that you need to just carve out time to do. And so these aspects of community have been really helpful and really important to me personally, to be able to have that resilience to continue to get up every day and go to work. Because you guys know, it's like we get tired. And there are days when you just think, it's cold and rainy outside and my comforter is really warm. And is it worth it to go and do those things? And do I have enough personal fortitude to get up? And a lot of times it's not that. It's because I have a staff and that community depends on me, or because I have these people cheering me on, or because I know that any obstacle I face during the day, there's a network of people who are willing to face it with me and give me their advice. We also try to facilitate that in the community ourselves. And so building community from our business focus, here are some of the things that we do. A few of my favorite things on there. Veritable Feast is where we partner with a local chef, and they come in and prepare a multi-course meal, and we pair it with book readings, and we have discussions about those book readings. It's usually all centered around a topic. So, for example, coming up in March, we're partnering with Little Boy Blue Barbecue, and we're talking about the concept of legacy. What does it mean to leave a legacy, and a legacy that you're proud of? And so we'll be reading excerpts from a few books. It's usually a couple fiction and a nonfiction, as well as those chefs will be talking about what does legacy mean to them as well, and it's incorporated into the food. One thing that I didn't even list on here that I also love that we do is we have this old school card catalog, which I really love, that anyone in there, like, 28 and below comes in and it's like, what is this thing with all the drawers? And we say, oh, it's called a card catalog. When you couldn't look on the internet for your books at the library, you pulled out the drawer and you sorted through the cards. So we have one of those from the University of North Texas. And on it, we have a little sign that says, here's our station to leave a note of encouragement for a stranger. Or if you need a note of encouragement, please take one, because there are enough negative words out in the world today that we think adding a few positive words is really beneficial. And so there's some stationery if you want to leave a note, and there are written notes that you can take one if you need one for the day. I am always amazed that I have people who have moved away that then write us and say, one thing I miss about Fort Worth is this station where I could leave notes or take notes. I've had other people who send me pictures of the note in their bag, and they've carried it with them for a year because they pull it out every once in a while to read it because it was encouraging to them in the moment that they needed it. We do some local author panels and workshops. We've done pet adoptions. We love having other small businesses come in and set up shop in the corner. We do that on Saturday mornings where they can sell their goods. We don't charge for any of that, and we ask them to just run their own point of sale so that they can take all of that, just because we feel like it's for the good of the community. Is there benefit to my store by having their people come in? Absolutely. But I don't believe that community works if you're not actively trying to build community and you're only asking from your community. And I believe that back to, that willing to be authentic and willing to show up and be present, that if I'm not willing to do that for people out of like a true desire to connect with people, then community is hollow and it doesn't truly build community. But when you actually care about the good of where you are and where you're working, then you give to the community and the community gives right back. Now, the reminder of that is sometimes it takes a lot of time, right? Like you invest and you invest and you invest and you don't see the fruit of that right away. But I can think of a time when Todd's mom actually passed away and we'd had people over and every once in a while we go, nobody has us over, what's happening here? But when that tragic event happened in our personal lives, our community showed up and provided meals for 2 months. And we thought, okay, this is what we've been building and investing in this whole time. And it wasn't so that they would take care of us later, it's because we truly loved them. But the flip side of that is we still benefited from that. And so I feel that way about the things that we do in our community. It is still from a genuine place, but they also show up when we need them to. Those are a handful of the other things. And that is what I wanted to leave you today with is resilience comes from, a little bit within, but a whole lot from being connected. And that is also why I agreed to and love that Creative Mornings exists. Because, even in your whole slides at the beginning, I was like, yes, that's great intro into what I'm going to talk about, which is when you come together and you're not afraid to talk about what you're going through and you're not afraid to collaborate on things and you think learning together is important, it is important. And so creating spaces like Creative Mornings where you can be like-minded and come together and build that community. I'm sure some of you have walked out of here with a new friend or a new business partner. We hosted Sheet Airs 2 days ago. And a lady was talking about what she did, and I was like, I need to talk to you. And so those moments happen, and they're really beneficial. And so I'm glad that you do Creative Mornings. I actually hope to come more often and be a part, because I think that this space is really important as we head back out into the world and try to do good. So, thanks.